Hey guys, Chelsea here. Now, the progression is coming up, and they've already released a bunch of spreadsheets discussing what the fuck's going to happen on it. So it's going to say, like, oh, instead of the 6 campaigns here with 2 sides of campaign, it's going to be Axis, like the Western Axis, Japan, Western Allies, and then, of course, the Soviets. I'm just highlighting it like that because it seemed easier for me. But because of this, they've divided it into 5 tiers, and depending on the tier, you'll be going up against stuff. And obviously, stuff like the FG are going to be in the high tiers, stuff like the MG34 with the drums are going to be in the higher tiers. But that got me thinking, there's a lot of low tier stuff that I was looking at that really, yeah, I get why it's low tier because it's unlocked quite early, but it will fall by the wayside it'll fall by the wayside, and that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to be looking at, essentially, I'm looking at each faction. I'm not going to do the Japanese because I really don't know anything much about the Japanese. And from the looks of things, they actually have it very solid with their one. But for the other 3 factions, I'm going to be looking at some of the weapons. I think, just don't sleep on these weapons. Now, I will be looking at, of course, every kind of weapon. Like, this will be, rifles, bolt action, semi-autos. I won't do select fires because really everyone's going to be using select fires because they're not going to change at all. But, these are going to be, like, rifles. These are going to be bolt action rifles, semi-auto rifles, SMGs, and a few other stuff, maybe more, obviously not water shit, but, you'll see a few more stuff out there. Anyways, that being said, I'm going to start with the Axis. I'm going to go with the Axis, then I'm going to go into Western Allies, and then I'm going to go on to the Soviets. So, yeah. I'm going to start with the Axis, and yeah, these are going to be some weapons I think you guys should check out when the thing drops. It's going to be, again, more for newer players, but yeah. I've been babbling on, let's talk about some firearms. I don't think there's any better place to start for the Axis than with this version of the Carcano. I mean, the Carcano Model 38 chambered in 7.35 is honestly one of the best bolt actions in the entire game. It's got a good 6-round magazine, it's quick firing, and it's got a bayonet. You can't really go wrong with this. I mean, most bolt actions have bayonets, but yeah. You really can't go wrong with this bolt action. It's a tier 1 as well, so it's going to be I think it's like the second unlock as well, right after the Gavera 33, and it is a direct upgrade. It is generally one of the best bolt actions in the entire game. Honestly, it's one of my all-time favourites. I'll probably say the only ones which I think are better than this are what comes next. There's one that will come a little bit later, and then obviously the Winchester and the number 4. Obviously the Winchester and the number 4 are not going to be on this list because everyone knows how good they are, and I reckon they're still going to be in the map, but these are just going to be stuff again. Just don't forget about this. This is a really good bolt action. The other amazing bolt action for the Axis in the early game is the VZ24. Now, the VZ24, the VZ24, whatever, it's essentially a Polish rifle, or it's a Czech rifle, I believe it is. And it's pretty much the exact same, only it has one less bullet in the round. It's got in the magazine. It's pretty much, yeah, it's almost identical in every way to the Carcano. I prefer this one to the Carcano because I think it's slightly more accurate, but it's still a very, very solid, pretty underrated. I think this is a very underrated rifle. In fact, generally, I think this is probably the Axis in Moscow's best rifle until they get the Gavera 41, because yeah, you don't really get much with the Axis. You don't get a Winchester coming in to wing Hussar you in the mid game. You're pretty much going to be stuck with the bolt actions until you get the Gavera 41, and this thing just really works well. It is one of the best bolt actions in my opinion. I love it. It's one of my favourites. Honestly, the only real downside I think it comes with it is its magazine here being 5 rounds. If it was a 10 round, like the, if it was a 10 round, it would essentially be the Axis' version of the number 4 rifle. Now, the Axis do have a version like that, which I might talk about. It's the VG.2. I'm not sure if it's a tier 2. It might be a tier 3, but even other than that, I think it's a very solid weapon, and honestly, really deserving of, in my opinion, as an underrated gem. Honestly, it is one of my all-time favourites. Just to show how much I like it so much, I've got it in every squad. Literally every soldier. I think the only exception being this guy, because I don't think I've got enough. No, it's because I literally just don't have enough. If I had one more, this guy would have it, and also this one, just because it's the wartime mod, and this one's just, you can't go wrong with a 25 round. But yeah, other than that, look, I use it all the time. It's a fantastic bolt action, and it's one of my all-time favourites. Another Italian weapon is the Armagavera. I cannot pronounce Italian. I'm not good with Italian. But basically, this rifle here, very solid semi-auto, I think. Now, I've used this picked it up off the ground a few times. It's actually not too bad. Yeah, it's only a 6-round semi-auto, which does hurt it a bit, but honestly, apart from the ammo, it's not a bad semi-auto. It's going to be a tier 2, so it's going to put it on the same tier as the M1 carbine, and that's about it. So, for once, the Axis will have a semi-auto advantage against the Soviets if they allowed this weapon to be used against the Soviets. But yeah, not a bad rifle, actually. I think this weapon is really criminally overlooked, and that is the MP34. Now, the MP34, if you don't know, it's the starting SMG in Normandy, and it actually isn't half bad. It's a very solid starting SMG. It's nothing too serious. Basically, think an MP28, but with an actual magazine. It's an MP28 with a decent magazine, and that's about it, really. You can't go wrong with it. It's generally one of those it's a weapon you cannot go wrong with. And that's what I like about it. It's a very reliable, sturdy SMG, which you cannot go wrong with. And generally, you can use this into the mid-game. Obviously, I think, when you get to the MP40, you probably should swap it out with the MP40 or the Beretta M1, judging by this list. But compared to what comes after it, I think this thing definitely will hold its... Definitely will... Hopefully, you shouldn't get overlooked. I mean, looking at what comes after it, like the FNAB, the Beretta Model 38 with the 20-round box, and the OVP and the Beretta M1918, yeah, this thing hopefully should stay quite well. I think it's a bit of an insult that this thing is considered the second worst Axis SMG according to that list, or the second unlock for the Axis, when the MP3008 is considered much better than this. And I'm just going to say, anyone who's used both of these will tell you the MP3008 is a pile of dog's wank, and this thing is much better in every way. Honestly, I just like this thing so much. It's underrated as fuck. Coming in for the final thing for the Axis, the final unlock, I'm going to go with the Sturm Pistol, which is going to be this will be the Axis's first and real anti-tank weapon, other than the they get a couple anti-tank rifles like the Panzerbushel 38 and 39, but the Sturm Pistol will be the Axis's first real anti-tank weapon, and honestly, it's not half bad. I know everyone was memeing at this initially, like, oh, this thing sucks, this thing cannot kill anything. I've killed a Panther with this thing in customs. Yeah, this thing can kill Panthers, this thing can kill any allied tank. I've killed every allied tank with the Sturm Pistol. I've killed Jumbos with it. I've even got a clip of me literally cheering as I killed a Jumbo with the Sturm Pistol. It is honestly, killing people with the Sturm Pistol, killing tanks with the Sturm Pistol is one of the most satisfying things in the world. And that's why I love it. It's a very good anti-tank weapon. Now, yes, I do know that there are better anti-tank weapons for the Axis. I mean, that reload speed of 6 seconds is nothing to look at. It is just, that is awful reload time. And as soon as you get the Faust or the Vaketten, you're pretty much going to abandon this completely. But for the early game, yeah, don't overlook it. This thing will pretty much be able to wipe most allied vehicles off the face of the map. It will require a lot of precision. It does require, you have to realise how to use it, but if you don't know how to, but to be honest, if you figure out how to use it, it actually is one of the most fun and one of the most satisfying weapons to use in the entire game. Another really good early bolt action, this time for the allies, is going to be the Enfield. This is essentially what the Carcano is to the Axis. The Carcano I mentioned, pretty much just think of it like the Carcano. It's pretty solid, 6 rounds in the magazine. Really, it's a really fun weapon to use. I love using this thing. It's really fun. It's one of my favourite weapons to use, and it's a shame that the number 4 comes really soon, because otherwise this thing would be just so good. I would say in terms of the early game bolt actions, this is definitely the best. In terms for the allies, that is. Not for the Axis. I would say maybe the Carcano is slightly better, but it's one of the best. Now, I haven't got insane here, but I would generally say that the M1 carbine with the grenade launcher is mostly overlooked. Now, the M1 carbine with the grenade launcher... Okay, let's get the main thing out of the way. Get rid of the grenade launcher, it's an M1 carbine. And the M1 carbines suck dick. They are generally one of the worst. They are, in my opinion, one of the worst semi-autos in the entire game. But if you put the grenade launcher on the M8 on, this thing turns into a free kill gun. Honestly, you can generally no-skill multi-kill with this thing. And I often did back in the day until I got the Grand. Now, is it a amazing weapon? God, no. But I reckon you can use it alongside, use it as a support weapon. I often do use, I use the Grands nowadays, but I use them as like as siege weapons kind of a way. I might see if I still got them, but where this guy here, where the Grands are, I would often just have this guy use the use the grenade launcher, fire a grenade into the enemy, just use it like sort of like quick, easy ways to clear a room. It's a lot of fun to use. I like using these, but I can agree the carbine part really does make it, really ruins it. Now, there's also a elephant in the room, which is that the Springfield with the grenade launcher, I believe it's in the Pacific. Yeah, the Springfield here with the grenade launcher, that one's also going to be unlocked at the same time as this. It's unlocked quite similar, but I think this might be a different grenade launcher, actually. Is it the M1 rifle grenade? But, yeah, I think this one is probably slightly worse, and also it's bolt action, so, yeah. I think, though, that the M1 carbine with the grenade launcher, it's an okay weapon, and really shouldn't be looked down over. Now, the Allies really don't get much SMG options. It's really just Thompson spam, and that's about it. And the Drum Mag Thompson's going to own in the late game. But honestly, I think the Sten gets overlooked. The Sten is actually... I know most people will pretty much just write the Sten off completely. But honestly, in my opinion, it's not too bad. It's a bit overpriced in Normandy at the moment because it's a tier 3 unlock. It's the... not tier 3. It's the 3-star, 3 to 6 star unlock. And, you're up against the MP35, which is God tier. Seriously, the MP35 is such a great weapon. But this one is just average. The Sten's it's an average SMG. It's average, basically. Think the MP34 from earlier, but, yeah, just the Allies version. So it's the Allies version of the MP34. I mean, hell, they even have a... But I think, they even have a 20-round option to compete against. But I think this is going to be a pretty solid option until you get the Lanchester, which is a complete direct upgrade, which I believe is tier 2. So basically, it's essentially the Allies version of an MP34, basically. It's still pretty good, though. Correction, before people notice, I'd noticed that the Owen is unlocked a little bit later. It's basically an in-between this, so I reckon it might be worse than the Owen. I don't know, I've not really used the Owen, so... Yeah, well, I'll probably, but yeah, the Owen could also come here as well, but I'm not really too familiar with it, so, yeah, consider this like an honourable mention. Now, the Allies don't really get much in terms of LMGs. They get really good ones, but they're all solid, but the problem is that the BAR A2 and the 1919A6 are so powerful that really it renders everything before them obsolete. And the Vickers Berthia is probably the best example of this. Essentially, it's the Vickers. It's basically a Bren, I would say. I think that's the best thing. The Vickers is pretty much... It's essentially just the Bren. But, yeah, it's just a Bren. That's all I have to say. So, yeah, don't look down on this. It's actually not too bad. I like using the Vickers. It's a very fun LMG. You've also got the Bren Mark 1, which I'll put this as well down here because for the exact same reason. Most people are probably going to use one of these two and maybe skip out on the Mark 2, which is a shame because the Mark 2 is pretty good as well. But other than that, yeah, not really much else to say about these two. They're just solid. Finally, I'm just going to go with another anti-tank weapon, the PIAT. The PIAT, honestly, yeah, I think this thing gets criminally overlooked. Most people are like, oh, the PIAT's so bad because it, requires some accuracy to use. It's actually really solid. In my opinion, the PIAT is going to be the Allies' best anti-tank option until the M9. And it looks like the devs agree on me because they've put the M1 as a worse unlocked in it for the first time ever. But yeah, the M9 I think is so good that it kind of renders the PIAT obsolete. Because the M9 is basically point and click, whereas the PIAT requires... Well, for some tanks it's point and click, for others you actually have to aim it correctly, but most of the time it's point and click. But yeah, other than that, it's still pretty solid. It's a solid anti-tank weapon. The only problem is that, again, the M9 is so good that this thing kind of gets obsolete. It's just obsolete. Oh boy, the Soviets. They actually don't have much, to be honest. There was not much in the early game for the Soviets that I was like, yeah, these are underrated. Because they're all just solid. But I'm going to go with two options. I've only got two things written down. They're both bolt actions, but in different campaigns. The first is the Dragoon. Honestly, the Dragoon is another great bolt action. It's a solid bolt action. Very good. But again, it's early game. And the problem with the early game Soviets is that there's a massive elephant in the room called the Winchester. The Winchester, in my opinion, is one of the best bolt actions in the entire game. Well, it's a lever action, actually. It's lever action. But this thing pretty much destroys anything. Pretty much is the Soviets' best rifle until they get the SVTs. This thing just dominates. And it's going to be probably the exact same. But yeah, this thing is so good. And yeah, it's a tier 2 unlock. So it pretty much makes the Dragoon and the next thing obsolete. The Dragoon, though, is still really good. It's got a quick bolt speed. It's really fun to use. Got a bayonet. It's just a lot of fun. And finally, the final thing I've got to mention is the Mosin Carbine here, which is essentially the Dragoon, but in Berlin. Honestly, yeah, that's all I can say about it. It's the Dragoon, but in Berlin. It's slightly high. I think it has a slightly better rate of fire, but it's still very good. It's a very solid, much better than this rifle here. Honestly, if you're in the early game, this is like... For the early game Soviets, this and the Dragoon will probably carry you until you get the Winchester. Then you should probably stock up on the Winchesters. Then you get the SVTs, and then later AVS and AVTs. But yeah, not really much else to say about the Soviets, because everything else is pretty much balanced as is. They're either really good or average. So yeah, not much to say, so I'm going to end this video here. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.